The Korean War, a conflict that defined an era where the world teetered on the edge of a global catastrophe. In a divided nation, superpowers clashed, ideologies collided, and millions of lives were forever changed. To understand the Korean War, we must go back to the end of World War II. In 1945, the Korean Peninsula, once a colony of Japan, was liberated by the Allies. But rather than seeing unity, Korea was split in two. The North was occupied by the Soviet Union, while the South fell under the control of the United States. The dividing line was the 38th parallel, and this simple line would mark the start of one of the Cold War's most intense and bloody conflicts. In the North, under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, a communist regime was established, heavily backed by the Soviet Union. To the south, the government of Syngman Rhee was a pro-Western, anti-communist republic, supported by the United States. Tensions between the two governments were high, and each side believed it had the right to rule the entire peninsula. By 1950, after years of growing unrest, the stage was set for war. On June 25, 1950, the unthinkable happened. The North Korean People's Army, equipped with Soviet tanks and artillery, crossed the 38th parallel, launching a full-scale invasion of the South. It was an act of aggression that would change the course of history. The South, caught off guard, quickly began to fall back. Seoul, the capital, was captured just days after the invasion began. The North Korean forces, with their swift and overwhelming advance, seemed unstoppable. But this was no longer just a civil war. The United States, seeing the North's communist advance as a threat to democracy in the region, quickly intervened. The United Nations, led by the United States, came to South Korea's defense. Forces from countries like Britain, Canada, and Australia joined the battle. It became a proxy war between the communist and capitalist superpowers. In September 1950, General Douglas MacArthur, the commander of UN forces, launched a bold amphibious landing at Incheon, behind enemy lines. This risky move turned the tide of the war. The North Korean forces were pushed back, and Seoul was recaptured. But the success at Incheon was short-lived. As the UN forces advanced toward the North Korean capital of Pyongyang, something unexpected happened. The People's Republic of China, under Chairman Mao Zedong, saw the advance of UN troops as a direct threat to its security. In late 1950, Chinese forces entered the war in support of North Korea, crossing the Yalu River into North Korea and launching a massive counteroffensive. What followed was a brutal back-and-forth battle, as the war moved from the frozen hills of the north to the embattled cities of the south. The fighting grew increasingly intense and drawn out. The front lines shifted back and forth, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The conflict became a war of attrition, with devastating trench warfare, harsh winters, and a constant loss of life. In 1951, after months of bloody fighting, peace talks began, but they would drag on for 2 more years. No side was willing to back down, but both sides were exhausted by the continuous carnage. By 1953, both North and South Korea were left in ruins. Millions had died, and the war had left deep scars that would take generations to heal. On July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed, effectively ending the fighting. However, it was not a peace treaty. The Korean Peninsula remained divided at the 38th parallel, just as it had been before the war. The Korean War did not bring a true end to the conflict. Instead, it left Korea divided, a stark reminder of the Cold War's ideological struggle. To this day, North and South Korea remain separate, with one nation still under the rule of the Kim dynasty and the other a prosperous, democratic republic. And although the Korean War is often called the Forgotten War in the West, it was a pivotal moment in history that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century. Today, the people of South Korea enjoy freedom and prosperity, but they never forget the sacrifices made during the war. The North, meanwhile, remains a totalitarian state, isolated from much of the world. The Korean War may have ended over 6 decades ago, but its legacy is far from forgotten. Its effects still reverberate across the globe, reminding us of the fragility of peace and the high cost of conflict. The Korean War is a reminder of the toll war takes on humanity. It is a story of bravery, sacrifice, and loss. And while the battle for peace in the Korean Peninsula continues, the lessons learned from this war still hold relevance today.